Jason and Jenny Cairns-Lawrence never set out to be the main characters in one of the strangest travel stories in modern history. They were an ordinary couple from the United Kingdom who loved to explore the world together. They weren't thrill seekers or adrenaline junkies. They didn't chase danger or court disaster. They were the kind of travelers who spent evenings flipping through guidebooks, planning photo stops, tasting local food, and finding hidden cafes. Friends would say they were cheerful, practical, and adventurous in a safe sort of way. But history has no obligation to respect your plans. Sometimes it rips them apart and drops you into places you never imagined you'd be. In early September 2001, Jason and Jenny finally arrived in New York City, a trip they'd been dreaming about for years. The air was warm, the streets were buzzing, and the skyline shimmered like a postcard come to life. They walked through Times Square at night, letting the electric lights dazzle them. They strolled in Central Park, rode the subway, and soaked up the city's energy. On the morning of September 11th, they were in Lower Manhattan, enjoying breakfast not far from the World Trade Center. It was the kind of morning where nothing feels urgent. Jenny was studying a map, planning which sites they could fit in before lunch. Jason was joking about trying to visit every diner in the city. And then it happened. A roar in the sky, not like a passing plane, but deeper, heavier. Heads turned upward. People froze. Then came the impact, a sound like the world breaking. Smoke erupted from one of the twin towers. The cafe's chatter turned to gasps, then to silence, then to chaos. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder and louder. Jason grabbed Jenny's hand, and they stepped into streets that were already changing. People were running north, away from the smoke. Police shouted directions. The air was filling with fear. They didn't know what was happening exactly, but they knew they had to move. When the second plane hit, the sound was closer, more violent. Shock spread through the crowd like electricity. Buildings loomed overhead, casting long shadows, and the air was thick with sirens and the metallic taste of panic. They were swept along by the crowd, moving block by block until they found themselves far enough to breathe without choking on the smoke. Hours later, they reached their hotel, shaking and exhausted, watching the news in disbelief. The skyline they had come to admire was gone, replaced by a wound of dust and fire. They were alive, but they carried the weight of what they had seen. Friends back home said what everyone says after an unimaginable event. What are the odds? They all agreed it was a once-in-a-lifetime tragedy. Surely nothing like it could happen to them again. 4 years later, in July 2005, they took a trip to London. It was meant to be a quick getaway. Some sightseeing, maybe a show in the West End, and dinners in cozy restaurants. That Thursday morning, they boarded the London Underground during rush hour. The train rattled through the tunnels, commuters buried in newspapers, the rhythm of the city beating on schedule. Then, without warning, the train shuddered violently. The lights flickered. A muffled explosion echoed through the tunnel. People looked up from their papers, eyes darting. Another boom. And then the realization. Something terrible was happening. They were evacuated from the train and guided up into streets already filling with police, emergency crews, and the sound of helicopters overhead. News began to spread. Coordinated bombings across the city's transit system. Jason and Jenny once again found themselves walking away from disaster. The streets were filled with dazed commuters, some calling loved ones, some just staring into space. Jason held Jenny's hand tighter than usual. This was no longer just bad luck. Twice in 4 years, they had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. It was unthinkable. And yet, the unthinkable was not done with them. In November 2008, they traveled to Mumbai, India, drawn by its vibrant colors, bustling markets, and rich history. They checked into the iconic Taj Mahal Palace Hotel, a symbol of elegance and grandeur. The first days were blissful, strolling along the waterfront, tasting street food, and marveling at the city's energy. On their third evening, the hotel lobby was alive with music and conversation. Then, in an instant, that harmony shattered. The sharp, unmistakable sound of gunfire cracked through the air. Guests screamed, glass shattered. Armed men stormed the hotel. Jason pulled Jenny behind a marble column, their hearts hammering in their chests. The air was filled with chaos. Boots pounding, shouts, and more gunfire. They stayed hidden, pressed to the cool stone, hardly daring to breathe. Hours passed like days. Outside, the city was under siege. Inside, the hotel had become a battlefield. They could hear the attackers moving through the halls, voices sharp, footsteps deliberate. Every sound became a threat. Jason whispered, "Stay low, stay quiet." Jenny nodded, clutching his arm. Eventually, armed responders began moving guests out in small, controlled groups. Jason and Jenny were guided through service corridors, stepping over shattered glass and overturned furniture. They emerged into the night shaken, but alive. The Mumbai attacks had claimed over 170 lives. Once again, the couple had been at the epicenter of a historic tragedy and survived. 3 countries, 3 separate devastating terrorist attacks. Each time, Jason and Jenny happened to be there. Each time, they walked away alive. Were they cursed with unimaginable bad luck or blessed with extraordinary fortune? The media called them the world's unluckiest couple, but others insisted they were proof of fate's strange mercy. Today, Jason and Jenny live more cautiously. They still travel, but they choose their destinations with more care, aware that the world can change in an instant. Their story is a reminder of life's unpredictability, of how thin the line is between an ordinary day and one that changes your life forever. And perhaps it's a lesson that sometimes being in the wrong place at the wrong time can still mean walking away with the greatest gift of all: your life.